Hello and welcome to another episode of AR on AR. I'm Adam Rose and today we're going to be talking mountain bikes. A lot of people have questions when it comes to adventure racing. What kind of bike should I buy? Is the bike I have the right one? What kind of tires? Should I get a dropper post? All sorts of things. So quite quickly I hope I'm going to be able to tick off all those little questions that you have and you rush out and get the bike you need. Okay, so first of all, what kind of bike do I need? I'll say it in one word: light. The lighter the bike, the more it'll benefit you. Now, in the world of road racing, people want light bikes for all sorts of reasons. They count every single little gram, trying to reduce the weight of the bike down to, I suppose, maximize their speed. In adventure racing, you're not going to be going very fast. So why do we need a light bike? Because you're going to be carrying that bike. A mountain bike stage doesn't always mean you're going to be pedaling. Sometimes you'll be pushing a bike, especially muddy, dirty conditions, going up very, very steep hills. And even more than that, you'll be carrying your bike on your shoulders, what we call a hiker bike section. So for that reason, you want a light bike. Generally, it's referred to as a cross-country bike, although you could arguably also use a trail bike. What you don't want is an enduro bike or a downhill bike. Those things are really heavy. They have a lot of suspension that's unnecessary for adventure racing. And a cross-country bike will pretty much be the most versatile bike that you could use. In an adventure race, the kind of terrain you're going to be covering will generally be fire roads, trails, single track, nothing much in the way of anything critical or technical, no steep downhill sections, and in some cases you might even be on tarmac. Okay, so you want something that's light, that goes fast, that doesn't have huge chunky tires. You just want the kind that are suited to cross-country. And in terms of bike sizing, we talk about 26-inch wheels, 27.5-inch wheels, and 29-inch wheels, what's commonly referred to as a 29er. So 26-inch wheels used to be, 10, 20 years ago, all bikes were pretty much standardized on 26-inch when it came to mountain biking. That's moved to the 29er end. And if you right now try and go and buy a 26-inch, it'll be pretty hard to find. The only people who tend to use those anymore are downhill mountain bikers. So you're left with the 27.5 or the 29. Even the 27.5, they thought that was the best compromise between the maneuverability of the smaller wheels and the ease of climbing that you get with the large size 29 wheels. But even that's going out the window, I'd say. So even professional cross-country mountain bikers are now pretty much across the board starting to use 29-inch wheels. So 29-inch wheels, a light bike, carbon frame or aluminium. I've got carbon here and aluminium. Again, it comes down to what you can afford, and carbon is generally lighter than aluminium, but also more expensive than aluminium. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that, but you want to go for the lightest bike you can, so carbon is the lightest material that you can use at the moment. When it comes to also, let's just say the 27.5 and the 29-inch, one of the benefits of 29ers is that they are easier to use when you're climbing hills, when you're going uphill. So 29er has that to its advantage. And when you're going downhill or going across bumpy ground, 29ers handle those bumps better. The bigger the wheels, handle the bigger bumps better. Okay, so 29 is pretty much what you're going to be going for. Even if you're not a very tall person, 5'1", you can get small bikes in 29er size. When it comes to the choice between hardtail or softtail, suspension on the front or suspension on the front and the rear, well, that's personal preference. I'd argue that a hardtail is sufficient. Some people might say that if you've got a very long race with a lot of rutted roads, your bum will basically appreciate having the softtail. My argument is, well, the softtail is going to be a heavier bike, and secondly, a softtail, there's more that could go wrong. Bearings can seize, mud can get in the bearings. So the carbon hardtail is my weapon of choice. If you go watch the Eco Challenge or something like that, you'll see a mixture between the hard and the softtails. So in terms of those forks on the softtail or the hardtail, the amount of travel that you need, I would just say straight out between 100 and 120 millimeters, maybe 130. Some trail bikes come with that, or even 140. You certainly don't need more than that. Why? Because you don't have any big jumps or bumps to go over. Okay, let's talk about chain rings. When you look at the bike here, you can see at the front of this bike, you've got 2 chain rings, and on that bike, you've got 3 front chain rings. Traditionally, mountain biking years ago, all the bikes had 3 front chainrings because it was thought the more chainrings you have, the more gears you can have. The more gears you can have, the more versatile the bike is. That trend has moved away to a much simpler setup. So pretty much if you go look for a bike nowadays, what you're going to find is a single chainring on the front. And what they've done to compensate for only having a single chainring on the front is to have more gears on the back. So the most popular right now is a 1 at the front and 12 at the back, what we call a 1x12. My bikes are either 2 or 3 chainrings on the front. I just, on this bike behind me, I have just pretty much, the bike came with 2 front chainrings. I do a lot of hilly country. I live in North Wales. It's very, very hilly here, so I benefit from having those 2 front chainrings. The downside of having more chainrings at the front is, again, more can go wrong, and there's slightly more weight to the bike, and you end up with shifters on both the left-hand side for the front chainring and shifters on the right-hand side for the rear derailleur. So I suppose you could say by getting rid of one of those shifters, you've got less that can go wrong. There is a good argument in that favor, and less to be jammed full of mud or gunk and all sorts of things when you're racing. When it comes to tires, pretty simple. You don't want very large knobbly tires, the kind that you'd use on a downhill track. You don't need those. So width-wise, you're talking probably 2-inch to 2.2-inch, I would say, maybe 2.1. You don't need 2.3, 2.4 and all that kind of stuff. It's too wide. And you don't want big knobblies. Why? The more knobblies, the bigger the knobblies you have on a tire, the more rolling impedance it's going to generate. So the kind of tires that are favored in adventure racing tend to have a central line down the middle of the tire, and that aids forward movement, less rolling impedance, but still some grip on the sides, so that as you're cornering or you're in thick mud or something, you do get some grip. Also, in terms of tires, a trend has been from having tires with tubes inside, inner tubes, to tubeless tires. And definitely you want to go down the tubeless route. Why? 2 reasons. If you don't have tubes, you've got less weight on the bike. And secondly, tubeless tires are less prone to punctures. You can get thorns. The latex or sealant inside the tire will just fix that hole immediately. You won't even know you've had a puncture. It'll just seal itself. When it comes to pedals, there are 2 varieties out there that are popular. Flat pedals, especially downhill riders, they like flat pedals because you can move your feet around really easily. And clipless pedals, where you have to wear a specific cycling shoe that clips onto the pedal. In adventure racing, most people tend to go with clipless pedals because when your foot fastens onto the pedal, it means not only can you apply power on the downstroke, when your foot comes up, you can pull up with your muscles, and that way you're generating power on the upstroke as well. So clipless pedals are the way to go, generally speaking. Unless the race was going to be really short and intense, you wanted 1 pair of shoes. You didn't want to swap between your trail runners and your mountain biking shoes, and there's a lot of mud, really dirty, filthy, then maybe just having flat pedals would be beneficial. But generally people are going for clipless pedals. When it comes to mud guards, a lot of people poo-poo mud guards, especially go out on the trail. Very few people have mud guards, I suppose because they think it looks cool to have mud coming up the back. It's not cool. In adventure racing, you want to keep your kit clean. The less dirt all over your body, up your butt basically, or all over your face, the less can go wrong. The less it'll get into all your gear, the less you get everything fouled up. So there is a good argument for lightweight mud guards when it comes to adventure racing. Just keeping the rubbish, the dirt out of your clothes, out of your gear, out of your pack. Yeah, they are a good idea. Water bottles, you want to take the weight off your back when you're riding. So if you are carrying a camelback or something like that, what you want to do is put water bottles on the bike instead. Okay, because the less weight on your body, the less, less suffering you experience basically. So if you can, get at least 2 water bottle cages onto your bike, even potentially 3. 2 inside the inside triangle and 1 outside the down tube. Okay, dropper posts, they're a great idea. One of the big steps forward in mountain biking. When it comes to adventure racing, don't need it. Why? You're not doing steep downhills, you're not doing jumps, you don't need that low center of gravity. Once you set your seat post at a certain height, it'll probably stay exactly the same for the entire race. So I would take the dropper post off simply to save the weight. When it comes to brakes, disc brakes, no question about it. There is a question about what size rotors you have on the front and the back. I would say 160 in the back, 180 on the front. That's perfectly fine. You don't need large rotors on the back, and you certainly don't need 203 millimeter rotors. That's overkill. That's downhill stuff. When it comes to axles, run through the center of the wheel, you want quick release so that you can take the wheels on and off, or through axles that you can unscrew really easily. You don't want axles that have to be removed with an Allen key or with a spanner. That's too much hassle. You want to be able to get your wheels on and off very easily, especially in expedition racing, when you finish a stage, you probably have to disassemble your bike and put it into the bike box. So it's really, really important to be able to get those wheels off really easily. Bar ends, you won't see bar ends very often in regular mountain biking. They seem to have gone out of fashion. In adventure racing, bar ends are a good idea. Why? Because you can change the position of your wrists. Instead of purely having your hands in front of you like that, you can find all sorts of positions which will take less strain on your shoulders, less tight muscles. Bar ends are a good idea in adventure racing. On adventure races, you often want to put various carrier bags on the bike, something we call a bento box, or bags that go underneath the seat. I'll get onto a full episode just about that, but essentially, again, it's that idea of getting the weight out of the backpack and onto the bike. So they are a good idea. In terms of navigation, on a mountain bike, you want to have a map board if you are the navigator. Again, we'll spend an episode on the different kinds of map boards that are out there, but they are a really, really good idea. What you don't want is the map on a case around your neck, and then as a navigator, you have to lift that map up to see where you're going. You want it on a map board. When it comes to the saddle, you want to go for comfort more than super light. That's the one place where you do want to make a few compromises. So yes, it's nice to have an ultralight saddle, but if you're going to be sitting on that ultralight saddle for 10 hours, 20 hours, you want something that has a little bit of give to it, a little bit of sponge to it, maybe some gel saddles, something like that. You can even get a seat cover if you want, a gel seat cover, and put it on for the race. One last thing about all this bike stuff. One little caveat. You don't need the best bike. What I mean by that is there have been very serious teams, what you would, podium level teams, who have won very big adventure races on the worst bikes. And it sounds a bit weird, if they're podium teams, why are they riding rubbish bikes? Well, it's happened more than once that these incredible teams, these elite teams, have arrived in a country, but their bikes have not arrived with them. And what do? The race is about to start. They've literally borrowed steel-framed clunkers off local villages, and yet managed to win the race nonetheless. So, what's more important is it's not the bike that counts as much as you, how fit you are, how strong you are, if you can carry the weights, if you can pedal well, if you can, push through whatever suffering that comes your way. I really, really am serious about that. Don't get too hung up on the bike. You can win races on things that people wouldn't even give a second glance. Okay, so if you have the money, yes, go out and get a great bike, but don't let it stop you from racing. Don't feel like in road racing you need to go get the latest and kind of preen and, do I have the latest? No. You are more important than the bike. You make a bigger difference than the bike, than the weight of the bike, than the technology that you have. Okay, very important. Thank you.